one of the reasons I want to talk about China, I mean, if we look at it, this is kind of a duh moment. China, a key market. Of course, we all understand that China is a key market, so I don't want to have to overstate the obvious. But I think what I would like us to realize is the challenges of us, Canada, doing well in this market. And that may be part of the story that we're going to have to tell. The complexity in China, we can say that there's going to be a great demand for commodities around the world, and they'll just buy our stuff. I don't know if you just want to take a passe, laissez-faire approach to how the markets are going to unfold. And at the end of the day, because I'll tell you that I believe that the mission that we just had in China was with Jason. Are you in here, Jason? Jason Cribbs, ADM from Alberta Agriculture, and we had a bunch of the industry associations. I think we have to look at the world a little differently and package on how we present ourselves to the world. So that would be, at the end of this, I think is going to be, a challenge for all of us, and see if we sort of agree with that approach. China overview. No surprising, the People's Republic of China is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It has doubled in the last 10 years, its economy. It's growing at an annual rate of 8 to 10% GDP. It's staggering. Every time you go back to China, the growth is incredible. 20% of the world's population. It is the most populous country in the world, and yet it is one of the largest producers and consumers of agricultural product. It's fairly close to being food self-sufficient. It has 9% of the arable land on the planet. I think they're doing something over there that we should probably keep an eye on. China's prospects, performance, and role in the international agricultural trade has implications for all of us. They are dictating a lot of what we're going to be doing in the future. And I think the food security aspect is going to be something that's interesting, because even last, and I'll make reference to it going forward, even last week there was an article in the New York Times. China is actively going around the world buying, leasing land in the millions of acres, and they're looking not for next year, they're looking decades in the future. Obviously, in a democracy, we don't have the ability to be looking at decades, but I think the idea is someone like China that is going to be one-fifth of the world's population, it means that we should be paying more attention and how we're going to engage them. Our current trade relationship with China is quite frankly, we've had a long-standing comprehensive relationship with China. And I think when we look at it, this is why I want to make reference to, includes political, commercial, scientific, cultural, and academic ties. This is not just trade. When we're engaging with China, we have to engage at them at all levels, because everything makes a difference. It has an influence. And what we took away from our mission in China a couple of weeks ago was, what is the Canadian advantage? What can we do that might be different from other countries to differentiate us? And right now, you look at our trade stats, yes, they've increased. Since trade liberalization, when China entered the WTO, it's been quite robust and healthy. We have, it's gone from 6 billion to 12 billion. And you look at our agriculture, though, now that's somewhat deceiving. It says 12% to 22%. The bulk of that agricultural exports to China is one commodity. It's canola. We do a lot of other products, and canola is a cultural and a historical crop for China. They have rapeseed, or 00 rapeseed, but the idea is our exports to China are really not that significant, and we haven't made much progress. You look at total imports from China, they've also gone up overall. The percentage of agriculture has been pretty consistent, but then you look at our trade balance between China and Canada. Negative all the way. I don't see that changing. But there is opportunities on the agricultural products, because, as Dr. Hughes and others said, China's got a growing population. They have approximately 130 to 150 million middle-class people, have more wealth. They want to buy products. And what did we say? They want to buy more meat, high-end proteins. That is an opportunity for us. This is also interesting, too, because China's agricultural trade environment it's a major global producer of agricultural products, as I said. Its agricultural trade has grown rapidly. They've exported, actually. China's exports of agricultural products, I don't know if you all think about this, but it actually troubles me sometimes. China's got 1.4 billion people, and they're exporting food. It's staggering for me. They've increased their exports by more than 88% through those years, And our agricultural exports, again, tripled. Now, roughly tripled from 1990 to 2009. Again, predominantly, a big bulk of that is one commodity for us. So we are not actually having significant penetration either in other commodities or value-added products in the Chinese market. The Chinese agricultural sector is now larger than the EU 27 and double than that of the United States. I think, I don't have the numbers, but I think it's over 400 billion based on the volume of their production. Canada's about 36 billion. So huge, and I think that goes to your map where you were looking at the overlays of the GDP of other countries. Same idea with China. Shanghai area, basically the population of Canada. China's agricultural policies. This, I really believe this. Food security policy is aimed at social stability in China. John, you know I'm a free trader, John, and I believe in the WTO. You got to realize China looks at life a little differently. Their focus, their lens, 1.4 billion people. So food security and social stability is the driver for all of their agricultural and domestic policy decisions. Now, is it completely like that? Do they follow the international rules? Yes. But when we're looking at China, we have to understand they've got 800 million farmers, plus or minus. If they have social instability, they've got complete chaos, and you basically would have something like a revolution. So when we're dealing with China, we don't have to like it. We have to try to change it. But we have to let ourselves know that the lens and how they're looking at it, it isn't just always going to be the WTO, science-based rules, and what is right. They don't play on the same realm of reality as we do because their realm is different. Again, I'm not endorsing it. I think we just need to be aware of it. So when you see myself, you see Jason, you see people from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency going out, and you wonder why we're not having success sometimes, it isn't just science-based approach and you can have the people talk to each other. It's much more complex. And incidentally, I think that was one of the reasons why the Market Access Secretariat was created, was to try to deal with some of those changes. Changing consumption patterns due to growth. We're eating perhaps less meat. In some cases, the Chinese are eating more meat in some areas. I think there is an opportunity to see them. There's a cross-pollinization of cultures. They are seeing some of the Western eating habits. So with wealth, there's a greater desire to have meat proteins as well as cooking oils and others are increasing. Cultural aspect of the relationship. China, again, has a different culture, how they interface, and how we respond to it. When in Rome, do like the Romans? Perhaps. Who's the demandeur in our relationship with China? You could say they need our product, but they can buy our product from around the world. So I think when we deal with China, we really do have to have a better understanding of how we deal with the relationships and the fact of respect. They are now an international player. And I just don't mean that because of their market. They are out there. They're on the Security Council. And did anybody make note of what happened when Libya started to unfold? China had 37,000 workers, and they got them all out. And what was really significant, the first time in the history of the world, a Chinese naval battleship came into the Mediterranean, and that was an extension of the Chinese power. And they were letting the world know, we're here and we're going to play. Now, of course, that's my interpretation. Nobody in the Chinese government told me that. The Chinese government, you know, when they want to make a road, they don't do environmental assessments. They don't talk about consultations. They can do things. So that's going to be a challenge for us. But we have to recognize when we're talking about agriculture, it's complex. It's very complex when we're talking with the Chinese. Having said that, what do we all want to do? We want to sell more commodities. We want to sell more products to China. We want to sell more products to other people around the world. In general, again, fruits, vegetables, high protein products, pork, very big on pork, poultry, and fish are expected to grow significantly in China. That's, and I think Dr. Hughes' point on beef, it's not natural for the Chinese. They like it. They've had beef, depending where you are in the north, Inner Mongolia, as opposed to the south. But beef is something they're starting to acquire a taste for, and they know in general terms they're not going to be able to grow the beef that they want. So imports will increase, and we've seen that And we're very hopeful, the government and working with the industries, we're very hopeful that you'll be seeing commercial beef into China in the not too distant future. Several factors on the production in China, though, that give them a competitive advantage that's a little different from ours. Labor costs. But they have inefficiencies in the system. Chinese don't own their land. You can't transfer your land to your family. They have non-transferable cultivation rights. So the idea is they have some inherent problems in how they're going to increase their production. So part of that is why they are looking overseas. They tried to lease recently 3 million acres in the Philippines. Philippines said, we'll get back to you. But we've been following it in my shop and others around town. They are leasing huge tracts of land in Africa where they're growing palm oil, and that's for their domestic. And what they're doing is they're building infrastructure for some of the African countries, and in exchange for that, they're getting long-term leases of land, and they're looking at production of, for example, palm oil, as I said, because they're looking 10 to 20 years down the road. So what we want to do is, where can Canada be part of that? I won't talk about it too much, but the beef market is very clear, what we talked about. At the end of the day, the high value end market, and I guess, Dr. Hughes, it's an interesting comment, and I take your point, you know, if it's in a pot, it doesn't matter if it's the back end or the front end of the cow, but at the same time, if it's 0.5% of that middle class buys high-end beef, that's a huge opportunity, and maybe that's the opportunity for us to brand what is Canada, what is Alberta, you know, the mountains and things like that. So there is a great opportunity, but the consumption of mid-value for beef has it's increasing significantly. And for those of you who know Mauricio Arcila, he was with us on our mission in China, and we visited some of the universities, and it was in Inner Mongolia, in Hohhot, and we were talking to a dairy farmer, and he said, I want to get into the beef breeding business. And he's a dairy farmer, and we said, okay, why do you want to get into the beef? He said, well, you know what? We're importing a lot of foreign beef, high end. I want to have a business model that shelters me from the vagaries of the dairy industry, which is taking off, but also, so he's seeing the demand. The Chinese themselves, that's a signal that they see that they're going to be buying high-end beef. I think that bodes very well for us. Dairy industry. It's quite interesting. I mean, outside of all the scandals that have happened in China recently in the last years, you know, the melamine, they have taken it so seriously, the major dairies. We were in a dairy that spent 1.2 billion RMB, so you're looking at approximately, $700 million or better, if I got that right, to create, it's probably one of the best factories, dairy processing plants in the world. European, German, the state of the art. It was a showcase. They have lots of money to do things, but at the same time, their demand for milk is rising and the supply is not keeping pace. That's one of the drivers for the mission that we just had in China. We have embryos, we have semen. What we've been trying to do is open the door for live cattle. Canadian dairy genetics are the best in the world. Our production values relative to the Australians or the New Zealanders can't even compare them, but because of a little incident called BSC that happened in 2003, we haven't had our live dairy cattle heifers back in. But at the same time, you do the business model, the Chinese are getting terrible quality from Australia and New Zealand. They're paying through the nose, and all we want to say is, let us be competitive. And part of it is, they have a huge demand, the middle class, for dairy products. Now, what's interesting,